in this episode.
There's a responsibility there for them as well. And in reality, it possibly could be a communication problem because everyone is different.
If you're willing to try this, and we'll see how it goes. Like, this isn't an infinite. Like, you are not going to just keep doing this forever if it doesn't work.
Let's finish it.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of The Closing Pitch. My name is Spiker Helms. I am your host for this show. I'm alongside my co-host, Dave. How are you doing today?
Good, buddy. We just got off the field. First win.
We had our first game, and one of our dudes hit a monster shot in the gap.
It was a nuke.
Yes, and kids were going absolutely nuts. It was almost like a college game, junior college game where it was almost like a walk-off. Like, he was literally strutting into home plate. It makes it sound like we're really douchebaggy, but it was just awesome to see.
They were just so happy to be out there, and then to have some of those results they had, like some big 2-out, bases loaded double that cleared the bases, that big bomb, pitchers throwing some nice pitches. I mean, it was just fun, and they were just waiting for any opportunity to go nuts.
And I know passion, some people are against that whole passion thing, but it was just very refreshing to see that passion for the game because you don't see it that often where most players are very stoic. By the way, this is not our topic that we're talking about today, but
perspective has changed a little bit, having the whole spring season wiped out for these guys. Now they've been with some of our dudes who played for a local high school who their last game there last year that they played was the state championship game. And I was like, did you think your next game was going to be here on May 29th? And they're like, no. So it was awesome to see. They were excited, man.
So we actually have a new guy with us. We have intern Todd.
Hey, how we doing?
He's helping us out for the summer. We actually have another intern as well, Trey. I'm going to try to get him on the podcast as well. That's one thing that we're trying to do is help give it a little insight on small business and kind of what we do on an everyday basis with marketing and just operations. And because again, we're in a very unique type of business.
Yeah, no, we're excited to have you.
Thank you.
So today's topic, Dave, is about persuasion. I love one-word talks. And starting with the topic of just persuasion in general. And when you first hear that word, you think manipulation, all the negatives come up because that word has a bit of a connotation to it. You think CIA, FBI, but I'm here to say that every conversation you have, whether it's a debate or just a regular conversation, you're having some type of persuasion inserted into a conversation. And when getting this topic, I was talking with one of our coaches, and I said, "Hey, how do you liking the podcast?" He's like, "Man, it's good. I enjoy it. We listen to it. I'm going to listen to the tactical guide on recruiting because that's a big topic right now, just because of the NCAA coming down with more legislation and stopping recruiting for D1 and D2, where they're not going to be able to come out until the end of July now." So he asked the question of, what do you do if our goal is to help players, but what if the player wants to do one thing, but it might not be in his best interest of the team, but more importantly himself, because his skill sets don't show that. I always think of the player that wants to play shortstop and bat third, but necessarily his skill set doesn't allow him to do that. At the time of the conversation.
No. I even think about it in a totally different context because I see it all the time with players who maybe have had a little bit of success in the past, no matter what age level, whether they're younger, older, etc. And you as the coach kind of look at how they're currently doing it and be like, well, I can see how you've had success in the past, but I can also play this little future game because I've been there before and say the way you're doing it isn't going to succeed in the future, and that it might not always be the same because, the game evolves, and as you get older, players evolve, they get better, they start to change and adapt. And, I always kind of take that persuasion at that point to try and coax them. What's that word I'm looking for? Help them change to the future so that they can adapt and stay with the current times.
The first thing that I thought about too was have you seen those memes where it's, this is how I picture myself dancing, but in reality, this is how I actually look when I dance, or this is how I picture when I sing, but in my mind, but I actually sound more like a broken record. Have you ever seen those memes?
Not at all.
I've seen those, yeah.
You know
Intern
exactly
Todd
what
has.
you're
Yes, he
talking
has.
I'm
You're
the
losing your
old guy
job.
in
Dave,
the
you're losing.
conversation.
Dave, you are losing your job right now.
Where you look at yourself dancing? What are you talking about?
So you see it on. It's probably because you're not on TikTok. That's probably why.
There goes the social media comment. It's in every episode so far. Just wait for Spiker to bring that up. Okay.
But it's so it's Beat in the Box. Correct me if I'm wrong. Todd, are you on TikTok?
Yeah.
It's Beat in the Box, the song where they sing like in front of like it's a shower, but then in reality like it cuts over and it's actually how they actually sing.
I think so.
That's
yeah.
the song.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're singing this song, Beat in the Box, which is like a famous rapper song. I'm not familiar with it, so I'm in that boat with you.
Okay.
But like they're singing, it's a nice catchy beat. Like you're like, yeah, you're bumping.
Yeah.
And then it switches over to where it's actually them singing, and they sound god awful.
Okay.
And my point is that we have this picture in our head that we are Mount Olympus, we are Zeus, we are this big bad dude, rather than seeing like ourselves for who we are. Which again, I'm all about optimism. I'm the most optimistic person, but at some point you got to know your skill set and be your authentic self. You hear that all the time. I don't want to make it a cliche, but being that authentic person and being the best version of yourself, because the world needs that version rather than you trying to be somebody else.
Yeah, and I think that's where that's where I want to head with this topic, is to really, I guess the point would be, how do you get the player there, or how does that player ultimately get there? Because there's going to be, I have a couple topics here that I want to talk about. I'm sure you're going to have a couple different ones, and I think that everybody's a little bit different in how they get to that ultimate spot.
And I don't think this is necessarily all onus on the student or the player or the employee
Or the coach.
Yeah, or even the coach. I
Yeah.
mean, even assistant coach,
Yep.
if you're the head coach or if you're a general manager
Yep.
coaching, like it's so what I'm saying is that the teacher, the person that is at more of a higher type of level, there's a responsibility there for them as well. And teachers get frustrated because they're like, man, the student just doesn't listen. But in reality, it possibly could be a communication problem because everyone is different. Everyone thinks differently. They start differently. There's a really good book by Dr. Caroline. She, I forgot her last name, but she has an Instagram account, Caroline Leaf.
Okay.
And she wrote a book about the brain and how we think. And she had a really good section in that book to where it basically was self-awareness. How do you actually think things through? And there are three things that really stuck out to me, which is some people are more kinesthetic, where they have to feel things out. Mm-hmm. Then you have sound, where they have to hear things, or they have to vision it and see it, like a visual type of learner. And for teachers, sometimes we lose the aspect of that because we're coaching up so many different types of people at a very mass scale. Like, here's an example. I mean, on a baseball team, how many dudes do you have on a typical high school roster?
13, 14.
13, 14, right? So that's 14 different types of dudes that you have to figure out what makes them quirk. How do they think things through when they first hear it? And then how do they actually process it? Because those are two totally different things. And sometimes we forget that, all right, Brad might be a visual type of learner. I've got to teach him through actually showing him how to do it. But Jason over here is more of a feel learner, so I have to move his body in a certain direction so that he can actually feel the correction that needs to be made. You know what I'm saying?
I do, and that's the tough part on the coach, and that takes time, and that's kind of like one of the notes that I put down there was, and something that I always start with, and I think I've mentioned this in previous podcasts when working with guys, is before I ever try to make an adjustment or manipulate a movement pattern or something that they're doing, before I ever do that, I want to get to know them. I want to get to know how they tick. I want to get to know how they learn, how they talk, how they communicate, which way they kind of process things, what they don't like for sure. I want to know, because then I can start to ease myself into the adjustment process with them. And the other thing I'm doing at that point in time too is building that relationship with that player and building that trust, because I think where a lot of guys go wrong and where they get pushback from players is that they immediately go in and tell them the negative things that they do. Well, you don't do this well, you don't do that well, you don't.
That's the worst.
You don't, this is why you're not hitting, this why not. And if I'm a player, I'm like, dude, stop. Like, who are you? I don't know you. I don't trust you. Why would I listen to you? And then that dude's going to tune you out forever. Whereas if you take that different approach, I've always thought it's going to build that relationship, and then it's a we, not an I moment. And when I then bring an adjustment to them, they're like, okay, I think this dude's got my best interests in mind. And then we start to go from there.
It's freedom. And luckily, my first corporate experience, I've only actually had one corporate experience where I was going into the financial world, obviously economics, going into being a financial advisor. And I had two really good mentors, really two good leaders, and they gave me a lot of freedom, and they were trying to coach me through and trying to figure out who I was, rather than I come into a new corporate life and they're literally like, well, this is wrong, you are absolutely horrible at this. And how you write that letter T on the paper, Jesus, figure it out.
Yeah.
And I was so fortunate because I've actually taken that experience. I was only there for like a month. Mm-hmm. And anytime I see them, like, hey, what's up? How's it going? Like, and they still remember who I am, right? So it's that type of leadership that's so important, because you never know what that first initial reaction is if you go hot in the paint and say, bro, like, you're not very good at this, and this. This is how we roll in this organization, and you better figure it out.
I think ultimately you're just going to have a ton of distrust. And you're never gonna. You're gonna. I'm not gonna say never, but you're gonna have a real tough time getting that player ever back in your corner again, because you have just, especially if they've had success. Like, take that example. What if that dude had a really good season prior, and you come in and just blast his swing or blast his throwing motion or whatever he's doing? He's gonna be like, "Hey, buddy, I'm pretty sure I led the team in home runs and hits last year, so you can take a hike. See you later."
Well, that's like our first conversation that we had at practice. I was like, you asked me, okay, who do you like, who do you dislike on these certain things? What do you think is their strengths? What do you think are their weaknesses? What do we need to work on even more? And like, I kept on thinking to myself, it's like, I don't know. I gotta see more.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know more. And there's actually one player where I was like, man, I hope he's able to catch up to fastballs and everything like that. Mm-hmm. And he's like, bro, he hit like 400 last year. I was like, well, that's why I didn't say anything.
Right. You know what else you said too, and it's another point that I had, and I don't know if I'm jumping the gun on this, but you also said in that same conversation, and this is about another player, well, I don't think he's going to make that adjustment that you're talking about. So let's see how he progresses, and let's see if he does kind of fail a little bit, and then use that failure moment as that entry into the adjustment process. Mm-hmm. Because that's a huge pedestal for us as coaches, to where if a player's having success, and even if we see down the road he's going to fail, it's going to be really hard to catch his attention in terms of, or persuade him to make that next adjustment to keep that career flowing. But then when he kind of has that failure moment where the competition's crept up to him or past him or whatnot, and he hasn't adjusted, then it's time to put your hand around him and be like, okay, buddy, now do you kind of see what we're talking about a little bit here? And let's try this so that we can make that quick adjustment and get back.
So we talked about the micro. Now let's talk about the macro on a team level, where you're trying to get all these human beings going in the right direction, rowing in the same path instead of rowing in opposite directions in the same boat. And the big thing is like, how do you get the mission through to all 14 team members? Or how do you get it to, even if you have a small group, 5 members?
This has been one of the hardest things, especially because I'll say, like, the age that I've coached over the past 8-9 years has been one that is heavily based in recruiting. So players are coming to me to play for me to hopefully get to the next level because it's a big recruiting year. So it's a real tough thing to build a team chemistry or a team relationship when ultimately they're worried about themselves all the time. But you're talking about getting people to all row together and all persuading it to be that culture that you want as a team. And I think it starts with using, verbiage of we, not I. I think it comes back to, celebrating each other's successes, being there for each other. That's something we talked about this morning with our guys. It's just we are going to celebrate his success like it's my own, and that we are going to be happy for everyone else, and we are not going to sit on what we call the island of me and only worry about myself or only worry about what just happened to me. And then when you kind of get that culture going and you see those guys ultimately just ecstatic for each other, like we did see today a little bit of, I think that's when you can start to mold that culture even further down that row as to what you want.
In professional baseball, it's really hard. And I kind of equate it to the recruiting years too, because you're all trying to make it to one direction, which is the next level, the thing. Mm-hmm. And in minor league baseball, it's really tough because if you don't perform, you're done. Mm-hmm. The stakes are really, really high. And so the team chemistry is a little bit different. And the managers are more of like a boss type of situation. I'm just talking from my experience. And they're just willing to plug in and strategize and make sure that they're getting the right strategies down, and putting players in the position for the team to win, where the players are actually in a position where they're trying to benefit themselves. So they're all trying to fight for batting in top of the order, batting 3, batting 4. In professional baseball, what happened though is that the managers would bring it to the veterans and say, this is your team. You need to manage the team and try to keep everyone going in the same direction. And we had 3 guys that played Major League Baseball on my professional team in Kansas City. And those guys, when I got to the clubhouse, they said it's basically like an unwritten rule. Let's give the guy a week and then we'll start remembering his name. But the veterans came to me right away, and it was like, hey, welcome to the club. Just let you know, like, we want to see what happens. Work your tail off. You're a rookie. Just make sure you're doing everything right. And whenever I was doing something wrong, they would point something out. So I think it's the same thing for if you want a team to excel, you have to find those leaders inside that group, which will then help manage your team. I kind of view it this way, is that if we think about it more of an army terms, you want those guys to be your generals.
Yeah.
And try to navigate them and be like, hey, this is what needs to happen.
I mean, that's 100% true. If you can get the guys because in every single team setting, there's 2 to 3 to 4 guys, no matter what sport, that everybody looks to. And if those guys are a cohesive unit and are saying and doing the right things, then everybody else falls in line. You said, what was that rule, the 20-60-20 rule?
Yeah.
So it kind of goes back to that again.
Yeah. If you can get the top 20% to buy in, and they're on your team as a coach, because you're only one dude or 2 dudes or gals, you have to get the 20%. If you can get the 20%, the 20% will take care of itself to get the middle ground, which is the 60, which will then the bottom half, which will fall in line. If you don't get that, the season ends up becoming a roller coaster, or the team becomes a roller coaster, and no one really buys in. And you really only have one shot, I feel like, which is the beginning of the year. That's when you have it. Your best shot is in the beginning of the year, because not many people know who's everyone on the team is. Usually they're coming together, or you have new people coming in. If you can get the buy-in from that top 20%, the rest of it takes care of itself.
Well, and if you don't get the buy-in from that top 20, that 60 reverts back to the bottom 20. Mm-hmm. Because that bottom 20 will then be real negative and anti this, anti that. and then you got a culture on your hands that you're never going to be able to persuade back.
My junior college coach, Clint Culbertson, was really good at this. He was really good at finding the guys that were really hard workers, and it was not necessarily the most talented players. He didn't go after the most talented players. And I don't know if he can really verbalize this. I think it's just subconsciously. That's just who innately he is, because he's a hard worker and just will outwork you. He gravitates towards those guys and develops a relationship with those hard workers because that's what he wants out of his whole team. He wants he wants basically himself out there working extremely, extremely hard. And and it was coming off of his World Series. It was my sophomore year or my freshman year, and he had some returners back, but it was actually the bottom 20% that was coming back, where it was unsure. They weren't really tested. There were some players that came back that were tested. They played. They were role players, but the others were not untested. So it was kind of like a weird type of transition, and I think from a standpoint that he didn't get ahead of it. This is just from a player's perspective. He can probably correct me if we're wrong. He'll probably listen to this episode and then be like, no, that's completely wrong. But from a player's perspective, he was trying to figure out who his personnel was, because the year before he had 4 or 5 dudes that he trusted a lot. And now there's a new group, and he didn't get ahead of the curve from the start, and ended up, we had a really horrible season. And I remember like it was yesterday when the season ended, he looked at me in the eye and he said, next year's going to be totally different. And literally he put us through hell.
And that does take me to a next point that I had. And right then and there, I think when you talk about at the start, when it's a relationship, right? Whether it's a relationship with a team or an individual, it goes back to that building that relationship, that core fabric first, and making sure that player or players understands what they're in it for. Okay, that we're here together, that it's not my way or the highway, because I think that's where a lot of coaches lose guys. Yeah. Whether you're teaching, again, an individual on certain, parts of the game, or a team on a culture of what we want. And if it's like, this is the way we've done it, I've done it for this way forever, you're going to do it my way, I don't care about your way. And more times than not, that's going to be a failed culture, a failed individual. Whereas if you get out in front of this thing at the start, lay out those guidelines, talk about it as if from a coaching standpoint, I am with you. I'm fighting with you with everything that we do the whole season. It is not just you out there on an island. We always talk about it. I think we've mentioned in other episodes, we talk about that 9 versus 1 mentality, that it's not just a pitcher versus a hitter, which is 1 versus 1. We have the pitcher, the catcher, the infield, the outfield, all working together in a 9 versus 1 psychology method against that hitter. I like those odds way better, and I'll take those odds throughout the whole summer or season.
Every leader that I've been around that's been really good has had some type of vision. And sometimes they would verbalize it, sometimes they wouldn't. But they had a certain vision that they had, and they instilled that vision by just how they acted. And their purpose was driven by either, I want to win a championship, I want to help players out, or I want to get players to graduate. I think for any leader, no matter if you're in corporate America or in a small business like ourselves, where we're trying to grow at a national scale, you have to have some type of vision and you have to have some type of purpose. And for the Tigers standpoint, we have both of those at an extreme level. I mean, we talk about it all the time when we go to lunch. This is what we want to do. This is how we want to do it. These are the expectations, and we're going to go out there and we're going to go do this because I want this for our people, and I also want this for myself as well.
So when you say that, like, I immediately think of we always revert back to some of the better cultures or businesses or teams that you see out there that just repeatedly win, right? So like your Duke basketballs of the world, or your, Patriots of the football world. And you talk about think about it when a player comes into that culture who's never been there. How often do you think that player has to get persuaded to do it their way? Do you think that's a hard thing to do, or do you think that's an easier thing to do?
I think from the start, where let's just say Bill Belichick was starting from ground zero, that's where all the hard work is in. But then when you get like a Randy Moss that comes in, Randy Moss mentions this in a lot of interviews.
Yeah.
Where, because he was known as like the bad boy.
Yeah,
he was the Rodman.
He was going to do it his way. And listen, he was awesome. I mean, that guy was a stud, but he was going to do it his way only, right? And then he comes into the Patriots, and what happens?
It totally flips, where he's now a team player. He's willing to be a role player. He doesn't want to be the big time star. Like possibly deep down, he wants to be that person where he's like, look, notice me, because there were some different antics that he had done throughout the year on the field, but it wasn't to the extent of like the off-field issues or anything like that. I think what really happens is Bill Belichick has a clear vision of who he is and has an unbelievable purpose, and also has a vision for his players and his team. And then he had a guy with Tom Brady who is an excellent veteran and a leader that he could go to and be like, this is who we're going to build a relationship with this guy. Are you on board with this? And if Tom said, yeah, hell yeah, I'm in. Bill's like, pull the trigger. We're making that trade. We're making that move.
So take this full circle, because this example is going to hit every single thing that we've just talked about. You talk about an organization or a business or a team, and you talk about that culture that's instilled within them, right? Then 2, and that culture has to be good. It has to be positive. It has to be proven. It has to be clear. It has to have a vision for the future. It has to have buy-in from the player, right? 2, you have those 4 core leaders or leaders, the top 20%, that just no matter what are going to preach that culture over. This is what we're about. And we know what the coaches are here for. We know what the leaders of this organization are here for. They're here to help. They're with us, fighting wholeheartedly the whole time. And then you go all the way down to that persuasion, which is what this whole topic is about. When a new player inserts himself, or a player who's had success and maybe needs to be persuaded another way, it's so much easier because of the base foundation, because of the pure relationship and the way that culture is set up, and how people go about talking about adjustments or persuading to a different way. It's so much easier at that moment because the foundation has been laid. But if that foundation is never there and has never been talked about prior, and then you go to the persuasion factor, it's like you're skipping ahead 7-8 steps. You better be lucky if that player is going to make that change for you.
And persuasion is not just words. It's actions too. If I show positive actions where I'm starting to deliver results, is that not persuasion as well?
Of course, because he's proven.
Yeah, so it's testimonial, it's action. Like anytime that you buy something, a major purchase,
it better have a 5-star rating.
It better have a 5-star rating. I'm reading those reviews. Also, is there someone in my network that knows who you are and have bought it?
I'm trying to buy a grill right now. I've asked at least 10 of my friends, what do you like? Do you like this one? And then I have one in mind right now, and I got 3 of my friends who have given awesome testimonials about it. I love my grills. I love grilling. And I know what I'm going to get. I'm excited about it. But, again, it's a testimonial. So I don't have to I'm easily persuaded.
And that's what you're trying to do, as if you're trying to get buy-in or trying to convince someone to be like, yeah, your skill set's better in the outfield. We can put you at shortstop, but I mean, you're way better in the outfield. But if you have that persuasion where the team is actually winning cures everything. And the player's going to realize, like, I don't think I should go to coach and like say like, hey, I should play shortstop. That's not going to happen.
Well, and as long as if you have all that stuff and you have that culture and that experience and that testimonial and the past history, it's really easy then when I'm having a conversation with a player to say, okay, you know what? You remind me of this guy. And you did the exact same things and you had success and you were having success. And then all of a sudden you started to see a little bit of, resiliency, a little bit of failure. Mm-hmm. And this is exactly what this guy did in the past. And it worked extremely well for him. And if you're willing to try it, and you got to learn how to do that verbiage, how that talk with the player. If if you're willing to try this, and we'll see how it goes. Like, this isn't an infinite. Like, you are not going to just keep doing this forever if it doesn't work. But let's see if it does. And then as we're working through it, let's see how you feel with it. And just give it a try. If you fail and you don't like it, who cares? I use that phrase all the time. Then what's lost? Absolutely nothing.
Yes, and again, it's not you're not manipulating them. It's not manipulation, because some people might view that as like, well, you're kind of manipulating them. I would say no, it's not manipulation, because you're driven by a purpose and a vision of this is what I want out of this team,
I'm here
and this
to
is what I
help.
would. Yeah,
I'm
that's
here
what
to
I'm
help.
saying.
I'm not manipulating for when I think of manipulation, I'm manipulating for my own personal gain.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to I would say that I'm trying to manipulate him for his personal gain.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to help him get out of his own way to have further gains.
Yeah.
So maybe sometimes that context and how I go about it is in a form of a manipulation, but it's ultimately to help that player get to where he needs to get to.
I will say this though, if the player just doesn't buy in, I think the best way to go about that is actually put him in those positions to where, like, okay, you want to play shortstop. So what we're going to do at practice, you're just going to play shortstop, and we're going to evaluate after practice how you did. If you do well, we'll move you on. So Coach Gutton did this with me. I wanted to be a switch hitter. I started switch hitting in college my freshman year. That's when I started. And then I went my junior year, Coach Gutton recruited me as a middle infielder switch hitter. So he told me, this is what I want you to do. We're actually going to put you in the outfield as well, which I was totally open to. But then he comes to me. I had a really bad fall, like throw up bad, like really bad. And the game was just too fast for me at the time. I ended up figuring it out. And he literally sat me down and he said, Spike, if you don't figure this out, you're going to be sitting on the bench. And right now, if there was a right-handed pitcher, you would not be in the lineup, because I'd be batting left-handed. That's what I was struggling at. At right-handed, I would just crush pitches. If there's a lefty in the lineup, you're going to be playing, starting every game. So I recommend that you go just bat right-handed, because without a doubt, I'm writing you in the lineup. And that literally made the decision for me, which is either I go down this route of trying to prove this guy that he didn't give me the best shot, and I did really bad, or I take his advice. It was a win-win scenario for him. He had a win-win scenario. And I told him, I was like, I'm going to switch hit. He's like, Spike, that's a really bad decision. Not realizing he was basically saying, I really do hope you do that, because that'll help our lineup out tremendously. And so it was a win scenario. I was going to be in the lineup if I batted right-handed. Mm-hmm. I was in jeopardy of not being in the lineup. So me being the person I am, I want to prove the guy wrong. I end up becoming a switch hitter, and then he ended up batting me in the top of the lineup. So how he did that was, I want to see how you go, and then we're going to reevaluate.
But I'll also take that context. He knew who you were. He knew you inside out.
That's true.
He knew exactly how to talk to you in that situation. And that's a key element to this whole deal. He knew that if he said these certain things to you, he knew that you had that drive, that guy you had that I'm going to prove you wrong in you, and you would go do it and ultimately help the team. Now, he could say that, he could come out with that tough love, that blunt statement to another guy, and that dude might shell off and transfer. But he knows how to then talk to that guy too. And that's one of the key elements of being a good coach, and we talked about everyone's different. And that's how, if you want to ultimately help and persuade guys into helping themselves, you have to understand how to communicate differently to every single one of them. Some are going to react well to tough love, that quick adjustment, that scare them straight into failure, and some are not. And you have to know that. You have to know exactly how those guys act and how they'll react.
And this goes like deep into leadership too, because like if you go hot in the paint as like a Napoleon and be like, this is my way or the highway, everyone just starts revolting against you ever so slowly. But then if you go weak in the paint,
they'll run all over
all over you, and it ends up being a really bad situation, probably worse than the Napoleon situation. And when my last final notes on this is, and we could probably talk about this in another podcast, is like the belief and creating that belief around like who you are and what your team is about and what your coaches are about. Because if you look at recruiting and when someone makes a decision on a school, it's the same thing with business. I mean, I'd love to have intern Todd's take on this too. Is like when you look at a business, like you can sense, is this a good situation for me or if it's not a good situation? And when the recruit goes on campus, they can tell like that's a weak coach. I don't want any. It usually ends up being that decision. Like the really good players make the decision based on the coaching staff.
Oh yeah.
Not the facilities or the location or anything like that. They make the decision off of the people.
100%. That's the key to being a good recruiter. It goes back to persuasion. It's like they know how to talk to you and they know how to talk to Johnny, because Johnny's different, and they'll do a different game for every single person. And again, it's not manipulation. To me, it's just a better form of communication. Let's put it that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree with that. What's your closing pitches? First off, we got to introduce Todd to the conversation.
Okay.
So the podcast is the closing pitch, right? Mm-hmm. At the end of each show, we both give our last takes or our last closing pitches on the show. Similar to how
basically a summary.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'd like to have. I'm not gonna put you on the spot right now.
That's fine.
Who's gonna go first? You or me?
Sure, I'll go. That's fine.
So after me, then you have your closing pitch on the topic.
Okay.
So here's my closing pitch. This is something that it took me a little bit to learn, but I think it translates in any aspect, whether you're in sports, business, life, whatever. Before you can ever try to, have someone make an adjustment or change in life, or try to teach that person in business a new skill set, or really just adapt better for the future in any of those settings, I'm a firm believer you better know that person inside and out. You better have that established relationship. You better have that foundation laid, because when you have that foundation laid, there's a certain level of trust within that. And once that trust is established, then the eyes are open, the ears are open, and they really know that you're there, ultimately bringing them information that you believe will better yourself. So if that foundation is laid, you have a much better chance of making that adjustment and persuading them to help themselves.
If you talk in specific terms and you don't use generalizations where it ends up being fluff, players can see through that fluff. But if you're very specific and narrow in your directions and how confident you speak, the persuasion is a lot easier, because then they can hear it in your voice. They can hear your passion. When you speak in general terms in that fluff mode, players can sense that, does he really know what he's talking about? And I'm going to leave you with this. I had 3 really good coaches and at 3 different levels. One was at youth, second was at junior college, and the third was at the 4-year university. And what they did really, really well was they stuck to their strengths. And they spoke through their strengths and their vision and their passion. And one was a really good organizational and process, but he was not a baseball guy. But he was really well respected, and he won a lot of games and would recruit like crazy and get the right players on a team and be phenomenal. And he was not a baseball guy. He just enjoyed and was passionate about it, and he was process oriented and got all the best players. Then you have a guy that didn't play college baseball, and he was more on the emotional side. He was more on the hard work side, and he demanded respect based on his actions and how he presented himself every single day. And he was so caring of the players that, hey, I'm going to do this, this, this. He didn't say it. He just did it. Mm-hmm. The last guy was on personal relationships, and he had really good strategy. He's been in the game forever. It's Coach Keith Gutton. A lot of people know him in the baseball world. He's like literally a celebrity. When you walk to the ABCA, we were sitting there.
His name came up today. I was talking to another coach, and boom, there goes G's name.
We were sitting at in Nashville at the ABCA. Peabody.
No.
I know. I messed it up the last time.
Opryland.
We're sitting on the walkway, and I asked him the question. I was like, how long does it take for you to how far can you get when you walk before you get stopped. And he just very Gutton-esque just goes, well, Spiker, when you've been here for 30-something years, at some point you're going to know somebody. And it wasn't like he was like an ego guy and he's like, oh, I get stopped like 5 times, 6 times. Like I can't even walk like 20 yards. It was more of, well, when you've been here a long time, you're bound to know somebody, which it's the personal relationship, because me and you were sitting on the side and I haven't seen him in 5-6 years. I talk to him every once in a while and he literally stopped and he goes, Spiker, what's up? And this is a guy that has so much on his mind. He has so many players he knows, so many people he knows in professional baseball that could stop him and ask him a question. He stops in the middle of a hotel before he had to get to his next stop and sat and talked about his grandson and his daughters, and he asked how I was doing, how you were doing. It's just unbelievable. And his recall is crazy. Yeah. So my point is this, is like, know your strengths and stick to those strengths, because that's what gets the buy-in from all the players. And you don't have to be a Coach Gutton. You don't have to be like my junior college coach. You don't have to be my youth coach. You have to figure out what your strengths are and be the authentic self. And that's what I'm trying to do every single day, is like, what is my spice? What is my take on it? And how can I deliver the message that I want to deliver to these guys?
Yeah. Awesome.
Intern Todd.
All right. So I was thinking about this the whole time listening to you guys talk. The 20-60-20.
Yep.
So for you as a coach, this past year I was able to be captain, co-captain, great honor. But so me and this other guy were the top 20, I'd probably say. And then everybody else was a 60, and then we had freshmen who were that other 20. So we had 80% with us, 20% not. Incident happened the first weekend, we're out, and everything goes from 80 to 20 to 0 to 100 against the coach. What are you going to do in that atmosphere? Just a quick question.
Oh, geez. So you're saying like from a player's leadership standpoint, or from a
coach's standpoint?
If I lose the whole team?
Within a week.
12 hours.
12 hours.
That's, yeah.
Man, not having known the situation, how bad did they lose him? Did they lose him like pretty bad?
I mean, the way they handled the situation was against what we thought should have happened.
I think ultimately you kind of have to own that as a coach. I think you have to own it and understand the situation, and maybe that, again, I don't know the details, but I would say, listen, guys, I made a mistake, okay? And I apologize for that. And I want you to know that the sincerity in that apology is real. And that from here on out, that situation's in the past. And that we're going to go at this together from here on out. And I don't think you're going to like immediately get them to go all flip back to 100%. Hey, we're right back with you, coach. But maybe you ease into that situation, and maybe you get, a little more buyback. And then from there on out, it's your actions. It's truthfully, it's how you go about it.
What I didn't catch the mistake. Like, how did he lose the team?
You want me to tell you the situation?
Is it podcast friendly?
It can, yeah. It can be.
Okay. Go ahead. If you feel comfortable saying it.
Oh, no, I'm fine with it.
Okay.
So we play Friday night. We won 12-11. Cool win, whatever. So we go to Saturday's game. Snow's out. In South Carolina, mind you. And so he's like, all right, we cancel the rest of the series. We're not leaving until Sunday morning. So people go out. They buy beer for whoever.
Yeah.
Go out, have fun, come back, I don't know, 12:45 I think it was. We group message blows up. 2 kids got arrested.
Ooh.
Okay.
2 kids get arrested.
Interesting.
For one was, I think, verbal abuse to a cop, and the other one was resisting help.
Okay.
I think that's what they narrowed it down to.
Okay.
So that happens. So coach is like, get everybody here. Whoever went out, come to my room. We'll have a talk. So they all have a talk, whatever. Come to the next morning, 6 a.m. We find out, hey, we're leaving these 2 kids behind. Can't do anything about that. AD said this, AD said that, so we're going to leave. And we're like, well, that kind of just ruins all things. And then
That's like don't leave a man behind type of thing.
That's how we felt.
Yeah.
And he was not about it.
I will say this. That's where you end up owning like the quote unquote paycheck as a leader. And that
Tough
is
decision.
It's a very tough decision. And for me, I think getting those 2 guys where it is, I think that starts in the fall or starts in the beginning. And obviously people are going to do what they're going to do, right? Mm-hmm. But I think from that standpoint, you're trying to make the best decision, one, for the team, but also try to teach those guys a lesson. And also a third, if you think about the university, I mean, sorry, I'm going down even more, even yourself. Like there's a lot of things that you have to think about.
Yeah, that's really tough because you got university policy, you got team policy, you got players policies. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that, but if you can, I don't envy that position, honestly.
I think it's a communication standpoint.
Yep.
I'm going to say this. I don't think in that situation he was wrong. But I think how he delivered it
might have been different.
Would have been different. Because if you think about it, say, all right, guys, listen here. So we had an issue yesterday. I've dealt with it. These guys are going to they're going to think about the things that they did. Mm-hmm. And we are going to be leaving. We're going to go back to campus. I will make sure that they're taken care of. And we are going to have a conversation with them when they get back. But they do need to understand what they did wrong. And us being in this situation, obviously we care about them. We're going to get them safe back home. But from this standpoint, I care about you guys, and we need to get out of this state, and we need to go back to the university to make sure that you are on time for your classes. Mm-hmm. When they get back, we're going to have a conversation as a whole team, and then we're going to figure it out. Because I think from a standpoint of the coach, he was saying, all right, we need to get these guys back on campus because they need to go back to class. They should not be punished for these guys' mistakes. That's how I would have handled it, and like actually brought these guys together and really thought it through. It's a tough situation. Like how that coach handled it. It's like,
yeah.
I mean, that's really tough.
Well, and again, I think it was all how you talked there. It was keeping the we together and keeping that whole culture together. Yeah, that's
so tough.
And trying to make because some of those, and there's been worse moments on different, teams in the past, and trying to make that a teachable moment for everyone and making sure that we keep that foundation, that core together. It can be a tough balancing act.
And there's multiple of conversations that have been had before that situation occurred, because who knows, he could have talked to the parents of those players and said, I'm going to make sure I take care of your kids. Mm-hmm. And he did that to every single parent along the line. Mm-hmm. Now you're in like a tug of war where these 2 guys did this thing and all these other guys did this thing. My junior college coach there, again, this is not normal when it comes to college baseball, so I hope people don't be like, college baseball is like this bad.
No.
But we had a similar situation at my junior college where there was a house party. Kids will be kids in college, but they were in a family residence, and the cops are called. And then what ended up happening was there was a bunch of DWIs, or not DWIs, minor in possessions sent out. There's a couple of 21-year-olds. They got off. But anyways, when we got back on campus the next day, whoever was at that party literally had the grunt of the punishment. And he just went all out on it and said, you guys are better than this. You need to put yourself at a higher expectation. This is what needs to happen. And he drilled that into the guys like constantly. And I was at that party, and what happened was I didn't get a minor position. I actually left early, and he literally ran the whole team because of that.
Yeah, because it's we.
Yeah,
it's we're gonna win together. We're gonna fail together.
So the question was like, how do you get that buyback if you've lost the team? And I think it's a communication standpoint. It goes back to what you said. And this is the hard thing about coaching. This is a hard thing about teaching because you care so much about the players. I'm assuming this coach cares about the players because if he's in college coaching, he doesn't care about the players. He needs to get out. But if you got into this industry and you truly do care, you've got to have a massive amount of communication.
100%.
Like, and that's what with the teams that we have, that's as much as we're possibly doing. Like, there's been situations, there's been sticky stuff that we've had to deal with over the years. And one thing that Aaron always does, and he doesn't say it verbally, but does, is he provides a massive amount of action and a massive amount of communication, over communicating, this is what we're doing. And he literally goes down the line from each family on that team if there is a problem and talks to them.
Generally speaking, the best communicators have the best cultures. That's
true.
Pretty much how that goes.
That's true. Here's an example. We had an issue up in Detroit with one of our teams, and Aaron literally talked to almost every single parent.
Yeah.
And again, guys, we don't see these players, all of our players. We just don't. When you're at a scale of national, there's only so much you can do. And we have a lot of trust into the coaches, but we had to help with the coach on this, and Aaron literally talked to every single parent. So I think if you ever get yourself in a sticky situation where you're like, oh, it's massive communication, massive action.
I agree.
Anything else, Dave?
No, I think that quite sums it up. Todd brought a huge question there.
That was deep.
Right off the bat, man.
That was really deep.
I like it.
All right, guys, if you are a repeat listener, please give us a review. Also, share this. If you find something in this podcast, whether it's Todd's question or Dave's inability to be on TikTok, go ahead and send this out to a family member or a friend. That's the best way that you can show appreciation to us. We are so grateful when that happens. If you are a new listener, I did not do the good intro for our new listeners and welcoming you guys. I apologize. But if you are a new listener, please subscribe. The show is about people, culture, and lifestyle, how to create a winning lifestyle. Please subscribe, give us a review, and also share it. That helps us out. So,
yeah. Thanks, guys.
All right, thanks. See ya. Thank you for watching or listening or both to The Closing Pitch. If you would like to get your closing pitch featured on the show, we use a podcasting app called Anchor where you can submit your statement or question via audio. Or what you can do is comment in the comment section of this post. We also accept direct messages. Please give us the A-OK if you do send us a DM to use your statement or question on the show. Last thing, please give us a review on your platform of choice. 5-star preferably, and we value your opinion, and this allows us to reach more people. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you in the next episode.